welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Shawna. If you're not new, thank you for coming back. So it's been a little over 2 years now since I've lived alone, and that's one of the questions that I get a lot as it relates to should you live with someone else or should you live by yourself. I know a lot of people after a while, and the older that you get, you kind of want your own space. Sometimes you have housemate issues and you're wondering if you should just move out. As the title of this video says, I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of living by yourself in Cuba and ultimately discuss, is it worth it? So I think the first thing to note is that I personally, since the beginning of Cuba, I always had a housemate. I've always lived with somebody. Y'all know Abby, y'all have seen Abby. My first Christmas in Cuba video isn't up on my channel anymore, but I'm sure Abby has been in other videos, I think. Abigail was one of the first friends that I made in Cuba, and we were housemates for about 3 years, 4 years. Abby and I lived together, and then she ended up moving out. I didn't do anything, not because of me, just landlord issues. And then eventually when she moved out, she started living on her own. And then when I moved out, I was living with a different housemate and then ended up living by myself. What can I say as it relates to living with somebody and not living with somebody? I think the first thing to know is the privacy, but also under the privacy, I'd put a subsection about the loneliness. So it's all fun and games, living by yourself and having that privacy and having that comfort of like, okay, if you want to walk around your house naked, you can with no issues or whatever. However, and I'm saying this as an only child, right? I'm very good with my own company. However, when you're in a foreign country and light gone or hurricane comes or a serious storm comes and your phones aren't working, light is gone, water is gone, and it's you one in the house, that's the worst thing. That's the absolute worst scenario. So that's the biggest con. And funny thing about it, I did experience that last year in 2022 was when the hurricane came to Cuba and we were there, and it was not fun. I didn't have light for, I think, a good couple of days. We didn't have light for, and then that was fine for me, right? I can't live without water. I can't live without running water circulating through my house. That was absolute hell. That's the first con. In the event of a natural disaster, you're all alone. And you're lonely and it's not fun. But the privacy, it is nice to have that privacy. When you come home and you don't really feel like talking to anybody, you don't have to worry about that. Like, you don't have to deal with the issues of the other person. So if you live with somebody that's constantly having like visitors and maybe you're not like a super social person, that privacy is nice to be able to like retire in your room and stay there. The convenience. Is it convenient to live alone? Is it more convenient to live alone than to live with somebody else? I'll say this, it depends. Because for example, I'm gonna give you a scenario. If you're at home and you did like a Mando order, or you'll have groceries getting delivered like the next day, but you don't know what time you're gonna be home, and then they randomly decided to deliver it in the morning, and you don't have a housemate, no, you don't have somebody that can collect those things for you. So it's kind of nice being able to do that. I also want to talk about the fact that 9 times out of 10, it's very, very, very hard to find somewhere where you'll live alone and there's nobody else on the property. And I mean that to say, it's hard for you to find a single apartment with just 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom and everything, and you're not sharing the space with somebody else. Not in the 1 bedroom, but it's very rare that you're going to find an apartment and it's just 1 room in there. Like, especially in Cuba, just 1 place. You can, if you have the money, rent a 2 bedroom, like maybe if it's a 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and then you just pay for the entire place and then you just don't use the other bedroom like that if you have the money. But a place like that's going to run you like maybe $600, $500 US. So the likelihood of that when you're a student is very low. So if you are looking to live by yourself, I do want you to keep in mind that you're likely going to have to live with Cubans. And that's not necessarily a bad thing per se, but it's like one of those things where privacy comes back into play. It's like, you don't know who's watching you. You don't know like what it is. Like, for example, especially if you don't have like your own entrance, your own area where if you're getting food delivered or anything, they would see. Or if somebody comes to the gate, you don't have your own like doorbell or anything, they have to call the person that lives in maybe like the main house, and that person goes out and lets the person in. If it's not like a friend of yours that would call and be like, hey, I'm outside. Privacy is something that kind of goes out of the window when it's a case like that, when you end up living alone. If you don't want people in your business, it's a little hard for you to like keep them out if the place doesn't have multiple entrances. So that's also something to note. Something else to note as it relates to the cons of living alone in Cuba: it's more expensive. It's harder to find a place where it's a 1-bedroom. And if you do, because it's just you, they're still trying to make sure that they can make a profit off of you. So if you're paying in US, it's not uncommon that places that is just a 1-bedroom are renting for like $400 US, $300 some dollars US. The lowest you can maybe find is $300, but it's very hard for you to live alone in a space and then you be paying $250, especially if it's in like inside of the central area of Havana, like the town. If it's out in the rural areas, then you can find for way cheaper than that, and they'll be very glad to have you as a tenant. However, in central Havana, that's very unheard of. It's gonna be more expensive. And again, there's a big likelihood that you'll be sharing a space with the owners of the house, and maybe they just have like an extra room or extra space and they want to make extra money, so they'll rent to you. But again, when you do that, the privacy goes out the window. Let's talk about the security. So security when you live alone versus security when you live with somebody else, it varies. Because, and the reason I say that is that yes, you live alone, but like I said, it's hard for you to find a space where it's literally just you alone in the house. If you can find an apartment like that, then obviously security might be a bit lower because you don't know who's watching you. You might not be home all the time. So, and maybe somebody knows the time that you're not home and then something might happen then. However, I will say the one good thing of when you live like, or when you're renting by yourself and you live on the property of somebody else and they're still on that property, which is the case of most people who rent and it's just them by themselves and they have their own space, there's always somebody home. Usually, like whoever it is that owns there's usually somebody always home. So you don't really have to worry about security like that. They know people in the community, so it's less likely that people will rob you or target you or try to break into your home, which doesn't happen that frequently in Cuba, but it happens from time to time. It's not a frequent thing. It's really safe for the most part. As it is to like your housing, for the most part, it's usually safe. But that's the difference with security, I think. Like, say you rent like a 2-bedroom space or a house and it's you and like a classmate of yours and both of y'all ain't home, and then somebody watch the time and now goes in. I feel like that would be the difference. However, in all the time that I lived with Abigail, that never once happened. Then again, there were bars on our house. But I'm just giving you like that scenario. That's how security is when you live alone versus when you live alone in Cuba, not even really alone, versus when you are sharing an apartment with somebody who both of y'all aren't like of Cuban nationality. First pro, their bills are cheaper because they're split by 2. So literally most of the times you won't be paying as much. Another additional con that I could say, most people that live alone, if they really do live like completely alone, which a couple of my guy friends do, where there's nobody else on the property per se, or they're upstairs so they don't have to interact with the people, you have to go and leave your house to go to the office for pay a light bill. Whereas the rest of us, when you live with other people on the property, you just give them the money and they go and pay the light bill. So I guess that would be the difference. Pro number 2, chores. You could split your chores. So for example, when I lived with Abby, we were a very forward-thinking household. We were very structured. So we split different days of like who would do the chores so that you wouldn't have any conflicts in the house. So like, okay, you do dishes Monday, I'll do dishes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right back until Saturday, and then Sunday it was just whoever. No, I think all of them were split. And then after a certain time in the night, so like after 9 o'clock, you wash your dishes that you use. Like, so there was a cutoff time. I feel like that sense of community was maybe a pro, as opposed to like when you live by yourself, you're just kind of lazy. You wash whenever you feel like wash your clothes. You wash your plates whenever you feel like washing your plates, like stuff like that. You don't really have anybody to ask to like, hey, when you're passing here, can you get this for me? Like, you have to really like, there's a level of independence that comes out like when you live by yourself. And It's interesting. I think my least favorite thing of when I lived by myself, I didn't have a travel buddy like that anymore. So if I wanted to go somewhere, could literally walk into Abby's room like the night before and be like, "You're busy tomorrow? Can you follow me go XYZ?" For me to do it now, it would be me saying like, "Abby," and I have to ask like days in advance, and then we have to check if we're both free. More while I just go out and do it myself. So living alone kind of also causes you to be more independent, which I would say that's a pro, because you're less afraid to like go do things. You just kind of get up and do things on your own time. You're less social. I guess it depends on you as a person, but you don't have to be as social anymore, and sometimes that again gets lonely and you kind of isolate yourself from like people. So the way to avoid not being super isolated is to throw yourself in different activities. If you're not intentional about that, you'll literally lock up in your house and no one sees you for months. And it's really easy to do as somebody who has done that before. But I find different activities to occupy my time. Also, I think my biggest advice for if you decide to live alone, have a good relationship with your landlord, especially if your landlord lives on the same property as you. It ends up working out. Like, they'll literally just give you free food, like banana or whatever, if they have the trees on their property. And usually they'll look out in the event of anything and make sure that your stuff are good. So if you are somebody who has now decided that you're looking into renting by yourself and you no longer want to live with whatever housemate, or maybe y'all just looking for different spaces, the only thing to consider, it's going to be more expensive, it's harder to find that place, and it limits your options a lot. Like, it's way easier to find somewhere where it's a 2-bedroom 2-bath, it's way easier for you to find a house when you have somebody else to look with, as opposed to when it's just one person looking for a single apartment. They're very far and few. If you find them, kudos to you, you're very lucky, but they're very, very, very far and few. And you also run the risk of, if the person decides to sell their house or sell the apartment, you have to move out same time. But I guess that happens with everybody. But the thing is, it's less likely to happen if it's more than one person renting the place, because that's a source of income. But that has happened to one of my friends before and she had to move. So do with this information what you will. If you have any more questions as it relates to renting or living alone, drop them down in the comment box. If you have not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Like this video if it was informative and helpful. And yeah, I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye.